Hopefully I don't run out of breath during this presentation because today we are talking all about cardio and programming it for the strongman athlete. So for a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today, I'll be talking about a few different energy systems, and more than the energy systems themselves, we want to think about the type of interval or duration. So we're going to think short explosive, moderate intervals, and then extended intervals, as well as steady state cardio, the importance of heart health and recovery, as well as your engine building. I'll also talk about mixed means conditioning versus true steady state, and a few sample programs you can use in your cardio programming to help you level up in that side of things. The first system we're going to talk about today is your short and explosive system. That's your ATP system. So this is when you want to think about things such as air bike sprints, cluster singles, movements of that nature. Your work duration is going to be 7 to 15 seconds of all-out effort, and you generally want 90 seconds to 3 minutes of recovery to allow your phosphagen stores to replenish. Now, there's going to be a lot of heavy sciencey words here. Just focus in more on duration of the effort as well as recovery times, and I'll also try and link it back to strongman specific things to make it a little easier to understand. So how we train this system, as I said, is stuff like air bike sprints. Think 10 rounds of max effort for 7 to 10 seconds if we're looking at pure power, whereas 5 rounds of 10 to 15 seconds if we're thinking more on the capacity side of things. And a good way of differentiating the two is power is your maximal peak output for one all-out interval, whereas capacity is your ability to repeat that same effort across multiple rounds. So for the strongman athlete, we naturally need to train both, because if we look at the sport, you're doing 50-foot runs with the sandbag, you need capacity as well as peak power output. So it's important to make sure that we hit both power and capacity, just based off of, though, you want to put more energy towards the one that you don't do as well on. So think if maybe you're pushing really hard, but you don't have that, 11th gear, you don't have that overdrive, you need to train power a little bit more. If you're really good for 1 or 2 runs of your event in a show or in training, but then you fall apart, if you have to do a third attempt, maybe you need to train capacity a little bit more. Next up here, this is more of your moderate duration work, your glycolytic power, so 20 to 40 seconds at a time, with generally 2 to 4 minutes of recovery to help clear the lactate. So you'd train this with something such as a 20-second all-out row or even sandbag roll-ups, and then a 3-minute rest. You could also do some mixed modalities here, such as 5 rounds of 10 kettlebell snatches, and then a 10-cal air bike with 4 minutes rest thereafter. Another way to help make inroads to this in terms of your own training with weights is rest pause sets, because again, you're getting that repeated effort, minimal rest, and you get those approaches to failure. So it has some transference there in that regard. But again, we want to think about all our energy systems to make a full, well-rounded, and complete athlete. Now, your glycolytic system is probably your big bang for the buck, and that's moreover your glycolytic capacity, because your interval duration here is 60 to 90 seconds, which if we look at a lot of timed events in strongman, that's where we want to be, assuming strength doesn't become your bottleneck. We want 1 to 3 minute rest intervals after each effort thereafter, because you're still going to work under significant fatigue here. So how you train this is 60 to 90 seconds of something like sled pushes and then resting for 2 minutes. You could also do a sustained circuit, combining a few different movements for 60 to 90 seconds of total work, such as a 30-second bag carry and a 30-second ball slams, and then resting thereafter, or even the heart shock protocol, which I'll talk about in a little bit here. For strongman specific things in terms of strength programming, timed sets obviously are going to have immediate carryover because it does replicate the demands of the event with that sustained effort. You might also do something such as extended rest pause, where instead of 3 clusters for your rest pause effort, you might do 5 to 8, so essentially death by rest pause, and you're going to work some glycolytic capacity there. But again, when I talk about these lifting examples, these are just some ideas. We want to focus more in on the non-loaded or at least lightly loaded energy system work, such as sleds, kettlebell swings, cyclical movements that we can repeat over and over and over again and get into a good tempo. Now, the heart shock protocol, for those of you unfamiliar, is fast becoming probably one of the most important reference points for a strongman athlete in terms of determining their cardiovascular fitness specific to the sport, as well as it's a useful proxy for determining a loading event performance. And how it's done is you'll need 3 sandbags in an ideal world, 1 below your weight class, 1 at your weight class, and 1 above your weight class, but make do with what you have naturally. What you'll do is you'll start off standing next to that sandbag. You're going to run 20 meters or 60 feet away from it, then run back to the bag. Then you're going to pick it up and carry it those 20 meters or 60 feet. That whole series is 1 repetition. Long term, your goal should be to do 3 reps at or above body weight in under 90 seconds, ideally sub 75 seconds. Now, as far as training the heart shock protocol, what you see on screen here is a nice little 8-week progression. It intentionally starts off a little bit too light. I do have weights in the examples for the 90-kilogram athlete. Just scale it accordingly, based again off of what you have access to and what you're capable of doing. And remember, one repetition is 60 feet away from the bag, back to the bag, and then carrying the bag. So that's 1 rep. And you want to do 3 reps, it's away, back to the bag, carry the bag, away, back to the bag, carry the bag, away, back to the bag, carry the bag. That's 3 reps. So then you'd rest about somewhere between 2 to 4 minutes, and then you do your second set in week 1. And as the weeks go by, you'll notice we increase the amount of reps as well as the amount of sets. This is an accumulation focused program where we're just building a wide base of cardiovascular fitness, which is why you see it end in a 5 rep max as opposed to a 3 rep max. If you were peaking for a show, we'd use a different protocol. Again, I'm keeping this whole video and lecture a little more simplistic. We want to think more of the accumulation side of things. This is something I would slot in after my speed lower body day in a conjugate framework, or even just put this in at an event day. Now, this is the part that a lot of you are probably going to tune out of video because you don't want to hear it, and this is just your standard cardiac output steady state cardio. This is your health priority work here. Your duration and intensity should be 20 to 60 minutes at 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. You should be able to carry a conversation, lightly panting, able to talk, but you couldn't quite sing. We all know what this is. So this could be, very light sled drags. You could mix in some yoke walks, for example. Ideally, something like an incline treadmill, recumbent bike, or a row. This is so very important for the strongman athlete, and I don't think it's talked about enough because this is going to aid you in faster recovery between every event during a longer show. It's also going to help improve your heart health and longevity. At day's end, regardless of whether we're carrying extra fat or extra muscle mass, carrying extra mass does mean more strain on our heart. We need our heart to be as strong as possible. And please, 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 please don't give me that line of, well, lifting increases my heart rate. That means it's good for cardio. Doing a wall sit for a long period of time will make your thighs very sore, but it does not make you a stronger lifter. In much the same way, you could run for a very long time and your legs will become very sore, but it does not make you a stronger lifter. There are different energy systems in play here, so let's make sure that we're not just lifting for a good time, but for a long time. And at day's end, having a good cardiovascular base means you're going to have a solid foundation for repeated high-intensity efforts across a whole training week, across a whole training day, and for the long haul. Now, for those of you who are still here and you're not wailing and gnashing your teeth, you want to aim for about 90 minutes a week of this type of work. And again, nasal breathing, conversational pace. One of my preferred methods here is the 20-15-10 approach, where you're going to split the cardio across 3 different machines. So it could be 20 minutes on a recumbent bike, then 15 on an elliptical, and then 10 minutes on the stair climber. And between each machine, you might even knock out something such as rear delt and ab work, because the odds are very good you're skipping that work. Most of us are guilty of it. Alternatively, you could integrate some mixed means workouts in. Essentially, think of these as mini CrossFit WODs, and I'll dive a bit more into that. All right, so when we understand mixed means, you want to think of it as brisk pace work without redlining. It's going to help you build your aerobic capacity, and the idea is you can use kind of functional, more full body movements. It's a bit more engaging mentally. So for example, a 15-minute AMRAP of kettlebell snatches each arm, some 10-calorie row, med ball slams, and then reverse hyperextensions, because that's also going to help with low back and recovery, right? You may as well integrate stuff like that into these. Makes the sessions a bit more productive. You could do every 5 minutes for 5 rounds, a 10-calorie bike, 10 double kettlebell clean and jerks, and then 10 gorilla rows each side. I love gorilla rows here too because they have that rotational element. For those of you unfamiliar, a gorilla row is where as you row one kettlebell, you're actively pushing the other one into the ground and you're in a bit of a gorilla stance. Essentially, it's a smarter version of the renegade row. And why these are helpful is they're more engaging than just plain steady state cardio on itself. It lets you practice skill and technique under mild fatigue. Doing something such as a kettlebell clean and jerk is going to have a little transference to something such as Atlas stone loading because of the triple extension. Kettlebells are really great for this kind of work because they are cyclical in nature. So it lets you use an Olympic type lift for cardiovascular conditioning in a way that's less disruptive to your recovery and less likely to beat you up versus, say, a barbell. And again, it helps support your heart health and better energy system development long term. You can also pick movements that force blood into tired and fatigued areas, which is what I like to do when it comes to putting together these types of workouts. Again, if you are writing one, think about the person who's 3 or 4 rounds in, not just starting off. They should be too light on paper. Now, something I like to do is I actually take the 20-15-10 method and I just add mixed means into it. So for example, it might be 20 minutes on a recumbent bike, then a 15-minute mixed means workout such as kettlebell snatches, row, ski erg, sit-ups, and then I'll finish off with a 10 by 10 EMOM of heavy kettlebell swings. This adds up to a 45-minute cardiovascular workout. Very effective, is very enjoyable. It's something I can stick to. And if I were to do this 2 times a week, that's 90 minutes a week of quality cardio work. The odds are very good though with something like this. I'll do something like this 1 day a week, and then the other day of the week, I'm just going to do 20, 15, 10 of cardio machines to give myself a more survivable method and allow myself recovery. But your mileage may vary. It's all about getting it done regardless. Now let's talk a bit about cardiovascular benchmarks. A few things we should be aiming for is a 65 or lower resting BPM, an 80 or greater HRV if that is something you track. And you want to think with the HRV, this is across multiple weeks, you're getting that data point. One night's bad sleep can be extremely disruptive to your HRV. A sub 8 minute 2K row or ski, with the gold standard being sub 7. And then another one worth mentioning is the air bike, the 10-minute test, where you should get 0.8 or more calories per pound of body weight in that 10 minutes. Here is a sample program you could use to help train your 2K row or ski. It's 3 days a week. Feel free to screenshot this one. Again, the idea with this is you could even do something like row twice a week and then ski once a week. I do recommend starting with a 2K time trial just right from the get-go, so you can establish a bit of a baseline time, see what your time split is across 500 meters, and use that to figure out your pacing across the following 6 weeks. Now, for the air bike, what we want to do is get a test, and you'll notice there are 3 intensity zones noted there. And this is where it gets a little weird, because even though we're testing calories per minute, because the air bike doesn't have that on the display, at least anyone that I've ever used, such as the Echo bike or the Air Assault bike, which is what I own, it will have wattage, however. So you do your initial 10-minute test, see what your average wattage was for that 10 minutes, and then use that to set the intensity zones on the screen. Now, once you have your intensity zones established, here's a good 2 times a week, 8-week protocol you could use to help improve your 10-minute air bike time, or rather wattage/calorie output. Now, with all of that in front of us, here's an example of how we might go about putting together a full week of training. And I've got both a 3-day full body program as well as 2 upper, 2 lower style to use as a reference point. And you'll see on screen right there, for example, after your lower max effort day, you'll do your rower work. Then you have your upper max effort day, then a cardio day where you might do the second day of the rowing program as well as an additional 20 to 30 minutes steady state. Lower dynamic effort, you would train the heart shock protocol thereafter. Upper dynamic effort, you might do the third day of the rower program. And then on Saturday, if we're doing a Monday through Sunday type thing, you do a 20-15-10 cardio workout, take Sundays off. Now, if you're doing 3 times a week full body, you might lift. Then after that is a cardio day where you can do air bike 1 plus some steady state work. Then full body lifting day 2. Then a cardio day where you'll hit the heart shock, then an additional 20 to 30 minutes steady, and then a lifting day 3 full body. And again, you could always slot in heart shock on a lifting day. It doesn't take very long, so it's not going to be very disruptive. And especially because you are a strongman athlete, or at least you're probably training like one if you're watching this video, there's something to be said for doing that kind of work on the same day. I mean, sure, the interference effect does exist, but the odds are very good for most of us. We don't need to worry about it that much, especially in the off-season, more of an accumulation phase, which is what this is written around. But then after your 3rd day of lifting, again, you do air bike day 2, an additional 20-30 minutes of steady state work thereafter. So you can see how these sample weeks keep everything lined in really nicely. It'll help minimize the overlap between, doing heavy lifting session and then a long cardio bout thereafter. That's just too much time in the gym in my experience. And also you wind up running into the thing where you just don't have the energy. This allows you to have each day be very focused and locked in on a specific need. But even with the first example, using the rower program after lower max effort, you think about that, you've probably done heavy deads, squats, single leg work. Doing the rower thereafter is going to push blood into your low back and help you be a bit more recovered going into the next session. Now, it is worth mentioning, do not try to do the heart shock protocol, the sub 8 2K row or ski protocol, and the air bike protocol all at once. Just like in our lifting, we want to progressively overload our cardiovascular system. I would say start off by adding either the rower program or a heart shock protocol. Do the 20-15-10 on your off days and build up from there. So that wraps up today's little presentation on the cardiovascular system and how we might train it for the strongman athlete. I hope you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. And folks, make sure to find me over on Instagram as Coach Mark Estremillo. Also, I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time, and the odds are very good. I'd love to work with you, especially if you are the kind of person who watched this whole thing through, because that tells me you're in it for the long haul.